John? Okay. Yep. John's up there hiding. Okay. He's at the switch. He's going to mic me up here in a second.
Maybe you don't even need a mic.
Maybe not. I have a pretty good voice. You have the thing on. So welcome everybody to the afternoon session with Matthew Fox. Those of you who attended this morning, and I'm looking at the faces since I stood up here already before, look familiar. So you kind of know what we're going to be in for, or into. I would put it a better way. In for sounds too negative. It's not. I won't read I was going to read the intro that Matthew had before, but I don't need to do that. We know who Matthew is. He's been a speaker here and a host of events like this before. He goes way back in the Bay Area, thank goodness, has roots grounded here. And as we all heard today, this morning, that talk and the grounding from me on going all the way back to the beginnings of this universe 13.8 billion years ago, and the way he presented it felt like the answer to me of the grounded piece that has to be there before we worry about the actions we take. So I look forward, I'm sure you all look forward, that's why you're here to this afternoon. So Matthew, and any more, thank you so much for being here.
So, welcome back everybody. I'm looking forward to our time together this afternoon. And a big part of my medicine for waking our species up is art. And I think that one of the mistakes in our culture in the West has been to relegate art to a few geniuses or something like that. It fits the capitalist model that art is about how much money can you make, but that's not what art is about. Art is the primary expression of spirituality. I tell my students there are only two ways to respond to a mystical experience. One is silence, and the other is art. And that's where all dance and all music and all poetry comes from, as Teilhard de Chardin says. You know, when our ancestors, the first time they experienced frost or the ocean, and so forth, he said this was the eliciting of the spiritual, the religious, and the artistic dimension to our species. And so what I'd like to do is to begin with a circle dance, which has always been part of my repertoire. So let's all get up, and I thought that maybe we could just gather a circle. I'm not sure how many, you don't know how many people are here until we're in a circle. So let's see if we can all fit around this group of chairs here, you see? Yeah, and if that space will be big enough. Yeah, this section, yeah. Are we going to stay in this section? Well, we're going to see if it can hold enough people or not. Now, if you have a physical limitation and can't dance, but I don't see anyone who is in that situation, you're welcome to sit in the middle. Okay, let's see now. Do we? Is this space gonna do it? I think it will. It'll be cozy. It'll be kind of intimate. Okay, so this is the chant I want to share with you. Because first, let's hear the words, and there's a great theology behind them, and then we'll put in the dance part. Here are the words. And it was interesting because it came out in the song that was sung this morning too, The Great I Am. So here's the words. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. So the chant goes like this. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Do it again and get more energy going. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Very good. Good for you. Now notice we're chanting the I am, and that's the great divine name. Exodus, Moses asked God, who do you tell the people you are? Tell them I am who I am, or I am who I will be. So we're celebrating our divinity, putting it out there. We are I ams. And of course, John's gospel has that for Christ too, right? I am the shepherd, and I am bread, and I am the vine, and all the rest. So, but notice, earth, air, fire, water, that's physics. That's the old physics. But it's physics. And it's cosmic. So we're talking, because physics has been with us from the beginning, chemistry. So we're chanting the cosmic Christ, the Buddha. I was lecturing in South Korea several years ago, and there were Buddhist monks there and everything. And one thing I talked about was the cosmic Christ. And afterwards, this Buddhist monk came up to me and he said, wow, he said, I've never heard about the cosmic Christ before. This is so exciting. Now I'm going to start preaching about the cosmic Buddha. So here we are. There's a cosmic Buddha and a cosmic Christ. And the Jewish name for that, Shalem, is the image of God that is in every creature in the universe, just like the Christ is and just like the Buddha is. So there's kind of a consensus going on there. Okay, so let's see, earth I am, the I am. Okay, now let's turn to your partner, which is someone next to you. Hello. Hello. Look at each other. Okay, what's your name?
Irene.
Irene, oh, beautiful name, yes. Okay, now you have a partner. Is there anyone without a partner? Is there anyone without a partner? Raise your hand. The woman in pink, do you have a partner? Yeah, so use your feet. If you don't have a partner, raise your hand and use your feet. We want to find a partner. Okay, now look over your partner's shoulder, because you're going to be going that direction and they're going to be going the other direction, right? So that's why you want to look over. No, wait. No, just look. We're not going anywhere now. Got it? So you know what direction you're going. Look at your partner face to face, and then you're going to be moving beyond them. They're going to be moving beyond you. Okay. Now, how are we going to move? This is how we're going to move. We're going to shake hands, right hand. Then move on, left hand. Allemande right, Allemande left. You've done this in square dances. We did back. No, not me. Hi, how are you doing? Indeed. There you go. Okay. You got it. There you go. Okay. Now stop. You've got a new partner. Okay. Hi. Now this is just like kindergarten, which is the whole point. Bring out the child in us. Okay, now we're not just walking, we're weaving. Weave your way, because what we're doing, it's a very modest task, we're weaving the universe on a Sunday afternoon in Walnut Creek. Do you believe it? Yes. Good. Okay, so weave, but also greet one another with your eyes. There's no time to have a I-thou relationship. This is not psychology. This is cosmology. And in cosmology, everything's moving, right? So we keep moving. You don't stop and freeze and fall in love right now. That's for another occasion. Or for your therapist. But it's not for cosmology. Cosmology is not the same as psychology. Okay, so we got to keep the circle moving, the circle of the universe. Okay, you all got it? Any questions? Okay, now remember, we're going to be singing. As you greet people and keeping the cosmos going and weaving the web of the universe.
Should we listen to Matthew, please?
I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, greet each other with the eyes, but nothing more. Okay, because we've got work to do making the cosmos again. Okay, let's begin with the circle. We'll sing it through once, and then we'll turn to our partner and start the dance. Okay, ready?
We all have different partners now.
Of course. No permanent partners here. Okay, let's begin with silence. Let's go into a deep place. call forth our ancestors, known and unknown, from centuries and eons back, billions of years. May they bless our circle and everything that needs changing on our earth today. Ready? Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Earth I am, fire I am, water, air, and spirit I am. Okay, now take yourself. We've brought forth the grace of nature and the cosmos. So now bless yourself with it 3 times. The earth, air, and fire, and the spirit that we raised by this practice. 3 times, and then so be it. Amen. All our relations. So, ho, have fun finding your seats in the cosmos. So, it's always good to get us out of our heads and on the ground. How many people like a prayer like that, circle dance like that, and the chaos involved? You see. Part of our time is learning to live with chaos, folks. It's here. It's not going away. It's going to increase, not decrease. So we need practices that get us to laugh again and to try to find order in the midst of chaos. That's part of our job today. And this is one reason why I'm emphasizing so much the role of imagination and the role of creativity today and the role of art. We've got to, as I say, broaden the understanding of art. I'll tell you about my mentor, Père Chenu, C-H-E-N-U. He was a French Dominican. I just wrote a book about him. An amazing person. And I had him the last year that he taught. He was 76 years old, and I was in his last class in spring of 1968 in Paris at the Institut Catholique. And he was an historian, and his specialty was the 12th century, as well as being a theologian. And I think he had more effect on the Vatican Council than any other person. And when he died, Etienne Gilson, a very well-known French historian who worked a lot in Canada, the Institute there of Medieval Studies, he said, a person like Chenu comes around once a century. It's quite a statement. But here's a really neat thing about Chenu. When he died at 95, the funeral was held at Notre Dame Cathedral, and the eulogy was given by a renowned historian in France who had studied under Chenu and was an atheist. Now, how fun is that? How many priest theologians in 800 years have had a funeral at Notre Dame with a eulogy by an atheist? And it was when I was translated that eulogy, I cried. I cried every time I read it because he understood Chenu so well. And he turned to him in the second person. He spoke to him, and he said, Père Chenu, you were a light in a thunderstorm. And he said, some people say you were. No, and he said you were so human. And some people say you were too human. But those of us who know you knew you were just right. And you taught us courage and resiliency and so much more. Now, the last time I saw Chenu, he was 91 and he was going blind. And because I would visit him whenever I could after I'd graduated. And if I went back to Europe, I always stopped by to see him. And the last thing he did, saying goodbye, he put his arm around me like this. He said, remember, the greatest tragedy in theology of the last 300 years has been the divorce of the theologian from the artist, the musician, the dancer, the potter, and the filmmaker, which is so French to include filmmakers in the litany of art forms. Those were his last words. And you must understand, there was a talk given a few years ago at University of Tübingen by the man who's called the father of liberation theology, Gustavo Gutierrez from Peru, a theologian. And the title of the talk was Liberation Theology, the Daughter of Père Chenu. So Chenu is the father of liberation theology, and he's the father of creational spirituality, because he's the one who named creational spirituality for me, and I have been running with that, trying to develop it ever since. And he is just so special. But I wanted to quote him on the role of the artist, you see, because this does not get the attention in academia, whether we're talking theology or finance or politics, etc., etc. The point is our imagination. You know, in the Celtic tradition, Sean O'Donoghue says, the soul is the imagination. The soul is the imagination, our imagination. And of course, proof of that can be found in Hildegard of Bingen. I see her book sitting right there. Well, a book about her, but she's staring at me. And, you know, she's now a doctor of the church, and she was an absolute genius musician. I call her Gregorian chant erotic Gregorian chant. It's like no other Gregorian chant. When I had my school here at Holy Names College, we had a class every year on singing her music. And it took so much energy to sing it. It was a yoga. She was practicing musical yoga. And always, when the class started, about a few weeks into it, people would drop out because they got so high doing it. But those who stayed just committed to getting high. And it was designed that way. It's musical yoga. But that's only one of her art. She also paints. My first book on Hildegard is on what she called her illuminations, which are her paintings of her visions. and they're stunning paintings. And of course, she was a gardener, she was a healer, she wrote 10 books, she was a scientist, and she was onto the science of her time. For example, one of her mandalas is a picture of the universe as an egg, because at the time she was painting that, scientists were saying the universe is egg-shaped. But then they said, oh, it's a circle. So then she started painting the universe as a circle. But again, notice what I spoke about this morning. Pre-modern thinkers think in terms of the universe, not in terms of just the human. And that's why they're so needed, whether they're indigenous or pre-modern, they're so needed today, because all of us have to unlearn putting the human first and find our context, the survival of the fittest, of those who fit into the ways of the universe. This is what is going to guarantee our survival. And so all that is about bringing in the whole dimension of our imagination and creativity. And we have these amazing figures from our ancestral lineage who absolutely honor and respect the role of creativity as the work of the Holy Spirit. Here's how Thomas Aquinas puts it. He says, the same Spirit that hovered over the waters at the beginning of creation, now we would say hovered over the fireball at the beginning of creation, hovers over the mind of the artist at work. That's Aquinas. The same Spirit that gave birth to this whole enchilada is still at work. That's what Pentecost means. And the Spirit did not retire. And evolution is not stopping or reversing. It's still going on. And that's what we're talking about in this context of our eco-crisis today. That we are being invited by the Holy Spirit to come forward again with the imagination. And that includes science, of course. And the questions science is asking and the technology it can give birth to. But it applies to everything, to education itself. It surely needs a kick in the ass. And to politics, and to economics, and the media. So when I use the word artist, I don't mean just those who are gifted to sing or to compose or to dance, although we respect that. But this great 20th century French philosopher Marcel, Gabriel Marcel, he said the artist is not just the one who sings and paints and dances, but those who take in the singing, take in the dancing, take in the films. That's art too, because you're in a relationship with the gifter. One of the reasons that Otto Rank, R-A-N-K, is my favorite psychologist of the 20th century is that there are many reasons, but one reason is his definition of the artist. He says the artist is one who wants to leave behind a gift. Is there anyone here who doesn't want to leave behind a gift? Then you're all artists. It's as simple as that. Now, maybe the gift is your children or your grandchildren. Maybe it's your work. Maybe it's as a teacher or a therapist or an artist or a clergy person or a gardener, whatever it is. We do want to leave behind gifts. It's our thank you. Thank you is built into the meaning of being human. That's why Meister Eckhart can say, if the only prayer you say in your whole life is thank you, that would suffice. So gratitude is everything, because you realize it's been a gift being here. It's been a gift to have been invited. And of course, there's bumps in the road and all this, and we make mistakes, and others make mistakes on us or against us, et cetera, and history itself comes along like an earthquake and upends everything, makes you start all over. I mean, you know, I love what Joe Campbell says. None of us live the life we had intended. I certainly apply that to myself. I never would have imagined my life. But what that just proves is that, hey, life is so much bigger than us. It's an invitation to stretch our imaginations, isn't it? And at this moment of eco-crisis, of facing directly our own extinction, which is very possible, like the other 14, 15 hominid cousins we so far have uncovered, at this time, we have to call on the spirit power of creativity and encourage it in one another. And when I talk about reinventing culture, two things come forward. One is science, and the other is education. Because a lot of my work, I've gotten in trouble with certain theologians in high places who hang out in Rome over the years, but I've also been, 50% of my work has been about education. Because I figured out real early that you can't teach spirituality in a Western model of education because it's all head. It's all rational. It's all the left brain. Einstein said, "I abhor American education." That's a quote. Even when he was living on Princeton campus for decades. Why did he say it? Why did Einstein abhor American education? He explains it. Humans have been given two gifts, he says, the rational brain and the intuitive brain. And the rational brain should serve the intuitive brain, said Einstein, because the intuitive brain is where we find our values. 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 Instead, however, we live in a culture that honors the rational brain and ignores the intuitive brain. When I watched, like you did, January 6th, 4 years ago, I said, this is a report card on American education. The values that were being flaunted and are still being flaunted was, for me, a statement. And there's so little room for values in American education. That's exactly what Einstein said. It's all rational. And you know, I love quoting Einstein on this because you can't call him anti-intellectual. I dare you to. But of course, remember, he said that imagination is more important than knowledge. But again, humanity is seeking values today, and this is one more blessing that is being bestowed on us even as everything is collapsing, including academia and our versions of education, etc. But what I tried to do over my 45, 50 years in education, because I figured out real early this isn't going to work, but what's missing in education is the body and creativity, just like Shanu had said. Art and theology divorced. Well, I should say theology divorced itself from art, but not just theology. All the sciences did that. But you can bring it back so easily, just like we just did an art thing here. Dancing together and singing together and chanting together and getting in touch with the child in us, the puer and the puella, which needs so much attention these days because we're so serious. We're so serious. We take ourselves so seriously. And we take our enemies even more seriously. And that's your reptilian brain going at it, you know. So one of the greatest gifts we have as a species, we have, of course, our intellect, but we also have what Einstein calls the intuitive brain. And that another word for that is mysticism. It's one more reason I love the mystics. Mystuein is a Greek word that says to enter the mysteries. It has two meanings. One is to enter the mysteries, and the other is to detach yourself. And so you can detach yourself from your rational brain by choosing to meditate or do yoga or to run or to swim. I mean, just myriad ways to calm the reptilian brain. But meditation certainly does exactly that. Because, and I pass this by my biologist friend, Rupert Sheldrake, and he said, it's accurate, he said. And that's this, that reptiles are not real good at bonding. They don't make the best parents as a rule. In fact, they tend to eat their children. So, but bonding is not their thing. But they're real good at survival. And of course, the reptilian brain runs our sexuality too. We don't want to cut that out. So we want to calm and tame the reptilian brain at times, but we don't want it to run away with us. And this is what's happened historically, I think, that the destruction of the planet is the triumph of the reptilian brain. We went to mine everything we could from Mother Earth and never gave anything back. And in the process, we destroyed all kinds of indigenous peoples and their religions and their values, et cetera, because we were out to make a buck or more. So that reptilian brain can be calmed by meditation. I was at a conference a few years ago of 150 scientists who meet every year on an island off in New Hampshire. And I was asked to come and talk and all that. And during the discussion period, one scientist, I remember he was in the front row from Pakistan. So he probably was Muslim. He asked, "What's meditation?" And I said, "Meditation is calming the reptilian brain." And he leapt up from his chair and he turned around to face all of this. "Did you hear that? That's the best definition of meditation I've ever heard in my life." But I want to point out that our ingenuity is so great, our imaginations as humans, that we've discovered other ways to calm the reptilian brain. And one of them, which I really love, is sport. So figure this out. Think of the Warriors. Well, no, we can't think of them anymore. They're too sad. But anyway, what they were. But anyway, so basketball. So you've got a defined parameter on this court, right? You've got a time clock, okay. You've got referees and rules, okay. So you got all this that both teams agree on, and then you put them on this court and you say, go at it. Use all your reptilian brain skills and any other skills you got to beat the other team. One of you is going to win, one of you is going to lose. And if you lose, you're going to be sad for 24 hours, and all your fans are going to be that way. But if you win, you're going to be high for 24 hours. But it's over then. No one's dying from it. All human tribes have sports and games. It's genius. It is really genius. Because what we're doing is playing with the reptilian brain. We don't have to be dictated to by it. We can play with it. There are winners and losers, but no one's being eaten after the game. That may have happened in certain tribes in the past. Literally. But we've advanced a little bit, So I think that we underestimate, and this is why sports are so important to people, I think, that they really are a kind of secular way, if you will, of moving on from the reptilian brain, of taming it, not just taming it, but playing with it. I just think that's so brilliant. That shows how big our imagination is, that we can play with those brains and move into another place. And of course, art is a third way of playing with the reptilian brain. Here's one of my favorite stories. When Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel, there was a crotchety old cardinal, and he noticed that Michelangelo was painting nudes on the ceiling. And this cardinal said, "You can't paint nudes on the ceiling. This is where the Pope prays." Well, our Michelangelo said, "I'm an artist. Get the hell out of here. You aren't." The cardinal did not stop at that. He went to the Pope. And he said, "Michelangelo is painting nudes on your chapel ceiling." And the Pope said, "Well, I guess you're right. He should put loincloths on them or something." So the cardinal went back and he said, "You got to put loincloths on those humans." And Michelangelo was pissed. He was angry. So what did he do with his anger? When he came to painting hell, he put that cardinal in hell. And he's still there 500 years later. Well, the cardinal went back to the Pope when he saw himself in hell. He went to the Pope and he said, "Now what Michelangelo has done, Now he's put me in hell. And the Pope said, oh, I can't help you there. He said, if it had been purgatory, maybe I could help. So who won that argument? Michelangelo won the argument. He steered his anger, into something constructive, just like Gandhi did and King did, and all those do who invoke nonviolence. Nonviolence is a tremendous act of imagination. What's interesting is it came from Gandhi. Gandhi says he got it from the Beatitudes, but Gandhi wasn't a Christian. Isn't that interesting? It took 2,000 years for a non-Christian to figure out and apply what Jesus said 2,000 years previously. Where's all that infallibility floating around in the Christian church, you see? But that's a fact, folks. Gandhi was introduced to Jesus through Leo Tolstoy, and Rufkin. He didn't get it through theologians as such. He got it through a novelist named Leo Tolstoy. What's that?
A Russian novelist.
A Russian novelist at that, like Dostoevsky, who we had at our meditation this morning. So again, I'm just telling you a few stories about how we can tame that reptilian brain. Now, a news story jumped into the news this past week. I alluded to it in my sermon this morning. And that is taking up the crisis in light of money, in light of the bottom line. You know and I know that money plays a pretty big role in our culture. And so I think moving into this direction to wake people up, and corporations and governments, has lots of potential. And especially when artists, and by artists I include cartoonists and humorists, satirists. We need the art of satire today like never before. And so here's this article called Climate Crisis to Cost Global Economy $38 trillion a year by 2050. And the lead scientist says, this clearly shows that protecting our climate is much cheaper than not doing so. And that is without even considering non-economic impacts such as loss of life or biodiversity. These figures do not include the rising of the seas. They left that out. And of course, that is a whole nother ball of wax. We're complaining and crying and ripping our clothes over immigration now. Wait until literally billions of people are displaced when the seas rise in 50 years. Where are they going to go? They're going to be knocking on a lot of borders. So the climate crisis will shrink the average global income 19% in the next 26 years, compared to what it could be if we stop burning fossil fuels. That article was published in Nature magazine on Wednesday. Bill McKibben, who, as you know, is a prophet in the field of ecology, says, $38 trillion seems like a lot of money. The entire world economy at the moment is $100 trillion a year. Federal budget is $6 trillion a year. This clearly shows, let's see, so that in the global north, U.S., German economies will shrink by 11% in mid-century, France 13%, UK 7%. But in the south, of course, which is, of course, warmer than the north, the shrinking will be 30% in Botswana, 25%, and in Brazil, 21%. The south will suffer the most. And McKibben says, these findings should persuade major companies to embrace climate action for self-interested reasons. Most corporate emissions come from how company money is invested by banks and the exploitation of fossil fuel resources. Now he says the They should be putting pressure on their banks to stop making the problem worse. They should also be unleashing their lobbying teams to demand climate action from Congress. These people are supposed to care about money. So this is appealing now to the self-interest of capitalism. You see, appeal to money. Yeah, let's make much money. They're supposed to care about money, and for once in their life, it would help us if they actually did, he concluded. Stop putting out ads about how green your products are. Start making this system you dominate actually work. Now, to me, that's damn good news. I recommend this article. I wrote about it in my daily meditations for tomorrow. Well, actually, the Saturday one, but also tomorrow. So you can get all the footnotes for it and stuff. Fine. Look it up yourself. But to me, it's astounding and it's scary and it's really something. But it also, a light comes through there. Remember Lenny Cohen's beautiful poem about how the crack is where the light comes in? This is a crack, folks. And it could be I think $38 trillion is a pretty damn big crack myself in the global economy, and a 19% drop in the American economy. You know, this should get every capitalist excited, pooping in their pants, and peeing in their pants anyway. And that is where common sense, justice, and compassion move in. That's the point, you see. Now, let's talk a little about compassion. Thomas Merton, 3 hours before he died, and I think it's been proven now that he died a martyr. He was murdered by our government in Bangkok, 1968. Remember the same year that King was murdered and Bobby Kennedy was murdered. He was murdered on December 10th, the very day that he had entered the monastery in 1940. What's that? 28 years before. Thomas Merton said this in the final talk, which, by the way, was entitled Karl Marx and Monasticism. It's not very diplomatic or politic or smart in the middle of the height of the Vietnam War to give a talk in Bangkok in the Southeast Asia entitled Karl Marx and Monasticism, but he was a monk after all. But obviously this talk was very important to him. He worked on it for a long time. And in it, he quotes like 40 different writers and philosophers and all this. But here's the line that always stood out to me. He said, compassion is a keen awareness of the interdependence of all living things that are all a part of one another and operate from one another. That's his definition of compassion. It's about interdependence. And here's how Eckhart put it in the 13th century. He said, what happens to another, whether it be a joy or a sorrow, happens to me. That's compassion. That's Matthew 25. When you feed the hungry, you feed me. When you visit the prisoner, you visit me. Right? That's compassion, is kind of getting out of the me thing and realizing other people are your me too. We are involved in one another. Now, what's so exciting in our time, and I just want to jump up and down when I say this, is that science is on board. Postmodern science is totally on board. One of their favorite principles, what they would call the law of nature, but Rupert Sheldrake, one of my favorite scientists, with whom I've written a couple of books, he doesn't like that word law of nature. He should call it the habit of nature, because laws evolve. And the idea of law in the Western mind is that it doesn't evolve. But in fact, the so-called laws of nature have themselves evolved slowly, but they evolve. We have to pay attention to that. But in any case, science is now dragged out this very word that this monk, 3 hours before he was martyred, used to define compassion. Interdependence. Interdependence. And you'll see that word in Hildegard of Bingen, in Thomas Aquinas, in Meister Eckhart. Our greatest ancestors and mystics have used that word. Now the science is catching up. I'm sorry, but it is. And of course, the Buddhists use it all the time too. I mean, all spiritual traditions
will use it to the extent that they're authentic, because it's non-dualism. And it is about this circle, the circle that is our species, working together. And this is why we need things like universities to bring our interests and our specialties together so they're not isolated, so that values and humor and all the rest can get along together. But to me, this is one of the most important discoveries, if you will, of postmodern science, and it doesn't get the attention it needs. Why? Because if you're talking interdependence, you're talking compassion. Compassion is not about dropping crumbs from the table. It's not about feeling pity for others. It's about acting out our interdependence. The joy that Eckhart names, and the sorrow, and which, of course, so much of which is delivered by injustice. So the prophetic work to stand up to injustice, to speak truth to power, all that energy is compassion. And Eckhart has a whole treatise on Luke 6:36, Jesus saying, "Be you compassionate," etc. And in it, he points out, he says, compassion is justice. Now, that's the Jewish tradition. That's the prophetic tradition. This is why prophets got themselves in trouble so often, including Jesus. Got himself in trouble with the empire. They did him in, like they did in all rebels that they could, as an example for others to get in line. That was the crucifixion. And so this story, now with science on board, has so much potential. And the Dalai Lama can say, we can do away with all religion, but not compassion. Compassion is my religion. Well, that's the future of religion, folks. And it's the religion Jesus was trying to talk about 2,000 years ago. I talk about how Christianity has to walk today, not with basilicas on our back, but with backpacks on our back. We have to simplify, strip away so much of the religious stuff that we're carrying, including the guilt and the shame and the original sin stuff that Jesus never heard of, because no Jews ever heard of original sin. What are we doing running a religion on erasing original sin when Jesus never heard of original sin? No one heard of it till the 4th century. Augustine was the first one, and Augustine was a messed up guy. If anyone ever needed Freud, it was Augustine. Why couldn't Freud have come along in the 4th century when he was really needed? I'm sorry, but Augustine is so dualistic and so anti-feminine. He just buried that patriarchal abuse into mainline Christianity. He said, and I quote, "Man but not woman is made in the image and likeness of God," unquote. Do you like that? Does that sound like a saint to you? You know, in the Greek Orthodox Church, they don't consider Augustine a saint. And one Orthodox theologian said to me one day, "I can't believe you guys canonized that guy," because they don't believe in original sin. And few people do when you check it out. Sister Jose Habde was a Franciscan sister and a Seneca woman who I knew well. She was on my faculty for years. We were friends, and a wonderful woman. She was raised on a reservation in Colorado. She had 9 brothers, and she was the only girl. She was the youngest and the only girl. Not spoiled at all, I'm sure. But she had 9 brothers. 8 of them were killed in wars. Second World War, Korean War, Vietnam War. There was one brother left, and he was a genius engineer. And he worked on the stealth bomber in Kansas. One day she got a phone call from a general saying, "Your brother is dead. Do not investigate it." Hung up. It turned out a lot of people who worked on the stealth bomber were killed. They didn't want any secrets out, I guess. She, who was not an easy person to scare at all, she's very courageous, she got in her car and disappeared for 2 weeks. She was scared as could be by that phone call. I think, frankly, that the monastery in Gethsemane, Merton's monastery, got a similar call when Merton died. And that's why they lied about the death. They said, oh, he was electrocuted plugging in a fan, coming out of a shower. No. 4 monks and a nun, the nun was a doctor, saw the body before any police did or anything. And they took a picture of it. I have seen that picture. The monastery will not allow the picture to be exposed. He's lying on his back with his hands like this, on his side like this, with just his skivvies on, and a fan is over his body. Every one of them had this immediate reaction of walking in the room. This is a setup. This is some artist did this, in the sense of setting it up. And this is the killer, there's blood coming out of his neck. You don't have blood coming out of your neck if you've been electrocuted by a fan. Furthermore, he'd been living in that room for several days in hot Bangkok in the summer. December here is summer there. I'm sure the fan had been used numerous times without killing him. Furthermore, he had not come out of the shower. He was getting ready to go in. And I know how they did it, because I lived in a habit for many years, so he was wearing a habit. When you pull a habit up like this over your head, it's a straitjacket. You absolutely cannot respond to anything. This guy comes up behind him and gets him in the neck, lays him down, and then sets up this thing. And there was no autopsy, et cetera, et cetera. And they flew his body back on a CIA plane to America. And he was the first religious figure in America to come out against the Vietnam War. He beat King to that. He and King were very close, as well as Thich Nhat Hanh, the three of them. So anyway, I don't know how I got off on that, but I'll tell you this, though. I have met 3 people over the years who were in the CIA in the Southeast Asia in the 1960s. And the first one I asked, did you guys kill Merton? He said, I'll neither affirm it nor deny it. I could have just said no. Are you kidding? No, he said, I'll neither affirm it nor deny it. The second one, who was actually, a student of mine met him, but she asked the same question. Did you guys kill Merton? He said this. He said, we were flooded with cash at that time, Southeast Asia, and there was absolutely no oversight. If there was just one CIA agent who felt Merton was a danger to America, they could have had him done in with no questions asked whatsoever. Then after my Merton book came out a few years ago, 2 months afterwards, I sat down with someone at a round table, a discussion of something, but we were talking, we were eating together, and he told me he was in Southeast Asia in the 60s in the CIA. I said, oh, I have a question. Did you guys kill Merton? He said, yes. In the last 40 years of my life, he said, I've been trying to cleanse my soul from what I did for the CIA as a young man in Southeast Asia in the 60s. And now there's this book that came out a few years ago called The Martyrdom of Thomas Merton. And it's the first real serious study of his death. And the guy interviewed all these people who saw the body before it was touched and all the rest. It's very thoroughly done and so forth. But I mentioned that because Merton still has a lot to teach us. And we still have a lot to learn about the shadow, of our government. I don't feel toward the CIA today what I felt back in the 60s. I think they've cleaned up their act quite nicely for the most part. So anyway, life goes on and culture goes on, but there's no virtue in being naive. And there's no virtue in nostalgia. Nostalgia is not a virtue. Part of the lessons of history are we want to ask the kind of questions we're asking here today. What is spirituality's role in helping people face climate change? And I can't believe how much denial there is. A whole political party in America doesn't want to talk about climate change. But, why is that? You see, why do humans prefer denial to wrestling with the demons that we all have to wrestle with? And better to wrestle together than just split by party or something else. So why isn't the virtue of truth-seeking, why doesn't that penetrate more deeply our souls and our politics and our corporations and all the rest, I think all this is what's at stake with this opportunity we have to wake one another up about spirituality and politics. So I'd like to close my part, and then we can get into some discussion with a few beautiful poems by people who are saying things to us that are so important today. One is Thomas Berry. He's many things. He's a scientist, and he's a geologian, is his name for himself, a student of the earth, therefore. But he wrote a brilliant foreword to a collection of Thomas Merton's nature meditations. But in it he says this: everywhere we find ourselves invaded by the world of the sacred. An absence of a sense of the sacred is a basic flaw in many of our efforts at ecologically or environmentally adjusting our human presence to the natural world. It has been said, we will not save what we do not love. It is also true that we will neither love nor save what we do not experience as sacred. Now, I received a dream about 20 years ago that was very important to me. It's what the Native Americans call a big dream, meaning for the community, not just for me. But this is what the dream said. It said, there's nothing wrong with human species today except one thing. Now, that itself is a bit of an awakening statement. I could ask you to jot on your notebooks there what things that are wrong with the human race. I don't think it's going to stop at one thing. But one thing is said, you have forgotten the sense of the sacred. That's what the dream said. There's only one thing wrong with us: the sense of the sacred. How do we recover it when it's lost? Thomas Berry talks about that. He says we will recover a sense of awe and the sacred. Notice he puts it together. Awe, sacred. Only if we recover the universe as a primary sacred reality. Which is exactly what Aquinas said when he said the best thing in the universe is not the human, but the universe. And by the way, Thomas Berry, I heard him give at least 25 talks. Every single talk, he cited Thomas Aquinas. Thomas was his name, his saint name, but he really appreciated Aquinas' sense of cosmology, you see. And then Berry ends this beautiful foreword by saying, eventually, only our sense of the sacred will save us. Eventually, only our sense of the sacred will save us. So it's an interesting question, what do you mean by the sacred? And how do you propose recovering a sense of the sacred? But what Berry is saying, it goes along with cosmology, you see. The cosmology is more than just about the facts of how we got here. It's something very profound in the feeling of how we got here. And that's why Genesis 1, which is a cosmology, it's about how the world unveiled itself. But at the end, during the process, everything was called good. But at the very end, in a circle, even with humans aboard, it was called very good. Well, I think that's getting real close to the sacred, the sense of the sacred. Now, here's something else Berry said about the universe that really matters, and it's very unity-like. The human venture depends absolutely on this quality of awe and reverence and joy in the earth and all that lives and grows upon the earth. In the end, the universe can only be explained in terms of, I'm just going to leave that blank for a second. If you had one word to explain the universe, what would it be?
Magic.
What's that?
Magic.
Magic. Nice. Well, all those are wonderful words. You could write a poem about that or an essay about it. But here's his word, celebration. Yeah. In the end, the universe can only be explained in terms of celebration. It is all an exuberant expression of existence itself. An exuberant, that's us. You are an exuberant expression of existence. So show it, do it, and protect the earth. Be not only a mystic, a lover, but a prophet. The prophet interferes. The prophet cherishes one's love to do something to protect it when it's in danger. And then he also says, we must feel, notice feel, that we are supported by that same power that brought the earth into being, that power that spun the galaxies into space, that tilt the sun and brought the moon into its orbit. That's interdependence, folks. To feel the cosmos, cosmology, not just read about it and get the facts right. To feel that you're part of this power that made all these things happen. Now, I want to turn to another mystic prophet of our time, Mary Oliver. I'm sure many of you have been inspired by her over the years. But again, I think that she's given us some language that that names the what we're talking about here. Just a minute now. I'm having trouble getting these pages now. I have these all set. Must be here. No. Oh, bear with me. Darn it. These right before it came out. Damn. Because this is a big book of her poetry, and I settled on 3 poems and wrote their page numbers down. And here I am not following it, not finding it. There, okay, thank you, Mary. Here we go. Okay, 285, yeah. So this is a collection of her poems that she put together just before she died. So I think it's fair to presume these were her favorite poems at the end of her life, but they go way back, some of her early poems. But here's one poem that ends this way. And the title is When Death Comes. I'm not going to read the whole poem, but I'll read just the end. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. There's that word again. Awe, wonder, amazement. Rabbi Heschel invented the term radical amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. We're not here to be tourists. We're here to be part of something amazing. That's why our creativity is being called for at this time. And that creativity can be organizing. It could be running for office. It could be supporting people who are running for office. It can be inventing things. I mean, I'm amazed. Every day there's something in the news about new inventions that are assisting the process of heating the planet and waking people up. So, so we don't have to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves, which is such a patriarchal thing to do. It really is. Despair is one of the signs of patriarchy. It is. And it comes from killing the mother inside, killing creativity. And a lot of competition comes from that same place. Now here's another poem. I'm just going to read part of it. To begin with, The Sweet Grass is the title of the poem. But I'm jumping into the middle. The witchery of living is my whole conversation with you, my darlings. All I can tell you is what I know. Look and look again. Look and look again. This is her definition of prayer. Prayer is paying attention, she says. This world is not just a little thrill for the eyes. It's more than bones. It's more than the delicate wrist with this personal pulse. It's more than the beating of the single heart. It's praising. Praising. Via positiva. It's giving until the giving feels like receiving. You have a life. Just imagine that. You have a life. Just imagine that. You have this day, and maybe another, and maybe still another. Suddenly, someday, I'm going to ask my friend Paulus, the dancer, the potter, to make me a begging bowl, which I believe my soul needs, a begging bowl. And if I come to you to the door of your comfortable house with unwashed clothes and unclean fingernails, will you put something into it? I would like to take this chance. I would like to give you this chance. We do one thing or another. We stay the same or we change. Congratulations if you have changed. Let me ask you this. Do you also think that beauty exists for some fabulous reason? That beauty exists for some fabulous reason. And if you have not been enchanted by this adventure, your life, what would do it for you? What I loved in the beginning, I think, was mostly myself. Never mind that I had to, since somebody had to. She was sexually abused by her father as a child, and her mother took her father's side. So the day she graduated from high school, she left home and never returned. And as she said, it took her years to get her soul back. Good for her, someone just said. Never mind that I had to love myself, so somebody had to. That was many years ago. Since then, I have gone out from my confinements, though with difficulty. I mean the ones that thought to rule my heart. That's slavery, our hearts being ruled. I cast them out. I put them on the mush pile. They will be nourishment somehow. Everything is nourishment somehow or another. And I've become the child of the clouds and of hope. She once said to Maria Shriver, I am a praise poet. Yes, but she rose from the dead of the via negativa, of abuse from her father and mother, because he denied it. I've become the friend of the enemy, whoever that is. I've become older, and cherishing what I have learned, I've become younger. That's mystic talking. Meister Eckhart says, I'm younger today than I was yesterday. And if I'm not younger tomorrow than I am today, I'd be ashamed of myself. Eckhart says, God is novissimus, the newest thing there is. And that's why both Bibles begin with the words, in the beginning. In the beginning. Because God is always in the beginning. And when we experience God, we return to the beginning, we get young again. And finally, this statement from at the end of her poem. And what do I risk to tell you this, which is all I know? Love yourself, then forget it, then love the world. I love that. Love yourself, then forget it, then love the world. It is beautiful. It's to the point. I heard her speak in San Francisco several years ago, shortly before she died. She filled the theater. And at the end of her talk, she said, I want to speak to the young people here and tell you everything I've learned in 83 years of living. I've learned three things. Number one, pay attention. Number two, be astonished. Number three, share your astonishment. That's what life is about, she said. Everything else is details. So anyway, I should stop now because we're running out of time and I want to have some time for your feedback, discussion, questions. It's on your mind. But yeah, I hope this gathering has brought a little bit of energy and hope. Despair today is a luxury. We don't have time for it. We don't have time for it. Whenever you find it, either correct it or go to another room, because it drains your energy terribly. Like Aquinas said, it's the most dangerous of the sins to wallow in. And there's cheap despair going around, and a lot of it has money behind it. So of course it's in the media, and it's 24/7 if you give it a chance. But don't give it a chance. You're so much bigger than that. We all are, even those that are despairing. So anyway, what questions you have or connections you want to make?
Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. With all the political stuff going on, there's one little thing that kind of confuses me, and I'd like to hear your point of view on separation of church and state.
Oh, well, for me, that's not confusing at all. It's one of the better insights of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, you know. So clearly, and this whole thing about Christian nationalism, especially when the Christianity being spoken of is not Christian, has nothing to do with Jesus' teachings or these saints, is preposterous. And it's a plot, well financed by the Koch brothers and other billionaires in this country. That's the thing. You know, we have 1,000 billionaires in America, and not all of them are sane or grounded. And their intentions are not all good. Some are just in there, like the Koch brothers, to destroy the environment and to make more billions or millions on fossil fuels. So that's a very serious situation today, that religion has crept into so much of the politics and, of course, the media. And keep your eye out, especially for this one guy called Leo Leopold, who's Opus Dei. Now, I did a study of Opus Dei. It's in my book called The Pope's War. And I know a lot about Opus Dei, but to make it succinct, the guy who founded Opus Dei was a Spanish priest who was a fascist in the 1920s. And he became very close to Franco, the dictator, and many of his men in the 1950s were on Franco's cabinet, for example. Opus Dei. And Opus Dei is, it's secretive, very secretive and clandestine, but it appeals to Catholic lay people. That's their trumpet call. Oh, we want to make Catholic lay people, bringing Christian values to their businesses and other stuff. But it ain't that. Look carefully at what they are. They are fascist. And they have taken over the Supreme Court. Leopold, no, here's Leopold, if I get the name right, or Leonard. I sometimes get his name, Leo Leonard, I think. Anyway, he is the number one guy who nominated the 5 far-right Republicans on the Supreme Court. Every one of them, beginning with Clarence Thomas. And the thing about Opus Dei is they have their own university in Spain, and it specializes in 2 things, finance and media. They're very powerful in the media. They're very big in Fox News, for example. They go where the power is. And of course, the Supreme Court is power. And years ago, when my book came out in Germany, I was on a book tour. They translated my book right away into German because it's about Benedict XVI, the first German Pope in hundreds of years. A journalist said he wanted to sit down with me. So we sat down for tea in Frankfurt, downtown, little cafe. He said, see all those look out the window, what do you see? I said, oh, a lot of skyscrapers. Yes, he said, all those skyscrapers are about finance, because finance headquarters is moving from Switzerland to Germany because of the euro and EU. And at the top of every one of those skyscrapers will be Opus Dei. Yeah. So Opus Dei runs a lot of the finance of Europe. And they are embedded now in the Supreme Court and its ideology and the jurisprudence of America, because they always have money. They've had the money to create these alternative law schools where they give it away for free. And they train these right-wing lawyers about how to be perfectly right-wing and successful in being right-wing. And they do the same thing with the media. So, I mean, follow that guy. And he's in these pictures of this billionaire from Texas who has paid for Clarence Thomas time and again. He's in there smoking a cigar and beaming away, so proud to get those two together like you got all the other ones too. So that's just one example. That's the Catholic version. And it's more subtle, it's quieter. People don't know that much about Opus Dei, whereas the Protestant version, is much more in your face, and we know about it. And of course, one good news is that the evangelical population is slipping very badly, especially with the young people. The younger evangelicals are turning their back on that church. So, there's a lot of movement going on. But see my book on that. It's very important if you want to pursue it anymore, that chapter on Opus Dei, because it's scary how misogynist. Oh, and by the way, the previous popes got the founder canonized, a saint, faster than any saint in history. I wonder how much money they paid under the table for that. And the guy was anything but a saint. He was a complete misogynist. He would scream at women who prepared his meals or the altar cloths, and he called them whores and things. I mean, all this stuff. But they reinvented how to canonize saints, and they took out the devil's advocate, the person who was trying to sow the shadow of this guy. They didn't allow any of the people who had. There's this woman who wrote a book about him, who had been his secretary for 7 years, and she told it all. And she was not allowed to testify at the canonization process, which is unbelievable. But that's just one example. Pardon me?
I said, no, it's not unbelievable. It's the Catholic Church.
In our time, yes, that's true. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
David over there.
Thanks for everything that you've brought to us today. I think I stayed here because I'm interested in right livelihood.
Right livelihood.
Yeah, and I thought, right livelihood.
Right.
And I really loved what you said about the artist and the imagination. But I've just been through a period of despair myself. I'm a little embarrassed to say, but I lost my housing and the work I was doing for an elder, and so I'm coming out of my period of despair. But I still feel so much fear to step into the role of the artist. I think that's where my soul really is. But I just feel so much fear about stepping forward in the world of work again, because it's been so painful in the past. And so anyway, I don't know what I'm saying, except I'm just putting myself out there and saying that right livelihood in the name of the earth, in the name of the cosmos and the universe is what I want more than anything.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you, because I think that's primarily why we are here. When people die, I always say their work is finished. And I often cry at a funeral, not out of sadness, but out of beauty. Because for me, a funeral is a circle. Their life is finished on this earth, and their work is finished. And it's just very moving to me to have a complete circle like that. And then, of course, we look to honor and to remember the lessons they've passed on to us. I don't know if you know my work, The Reinvention of Work. But if you don't, it might be right up your alley, because that's the whole point. And in that book is to bring spirituality and work together, and to make the difference between a job, which is a paycheck to pay your bills, and work. Why you're here on earth is work. So you might want to look that book up. And what I do, part of my methodology, is to draw from all the world's spiritual traditions, and I find an incredible consensus. And the consensus, is summarized in the Tao Te Ching. In work, do what you enjoy. But Aquinas says something very similar. And all these other traditions do, the Hindus do too. So that work is, and then at the end, I have 35 questions or something like that to ask about work. The first is, what joy do you derive from your work? And secondly, what joy do others derive from your work? I think those are the most important questions for knowing what our work is, as distinct from just paying the bills. If you're blessed or lucky, they go together. But that's not always the case. We have to realize that. But to me, that's such an important question. In fact, I'm proud to say that Italians have just translated my workbook into Italian. So I'm going there this summer because we're doing a conference on Norvieto, a city that's an artist city where Aquinas lived. And this is the 800th anniversary of his death, of his birth and 750th anniversary of his death. So, so part of what I'll be doing before our conference is doing some talks on the workbook that's coming out in Italian. But the guy who translated it, who has a PhD from Claremont University here, though he's Italian, he did the second half of my book. He did like Studs Terkel's book, interviewing workers. Yeah, and I love what he's done, and I love what Studs Terkel did. In fact, when the book came out, I was invited by Studs Terkel to come to his radio program in Chicago on his 80th birthday. It was so exciting. I always admired the guy. And they had just made a musical of his book, Working, where he interviews all these different kind of workers. And I used his book, of course, in mine. And he would ask me a question, we'd discuss, and then he'd put the record on. We'd play one of the songs from the musical. That was his 80th birthday present to himself. So that was kind of fun. But anyway, definitely. Now, what I hear from you is you want to get stronger. Yeah. So here's a real important practice to make us all stronger warriors in a time of grief. Because we must pay attention to the grief. We all have grief. And despair is not necessarily grief, but it's the end result. Get a drum and beat it daily for 15 minutes. I got this lesson from a shaman years ago when I was going through a great loss. And it really works. And it's genius, you see. Because, the first level of grief is anger. And the second level is sadness, sorrow. The third level is moving on. Put it behind you. But the genius is when you're beating a drum, you're riding a horse into the land of grief. That's what they teach me. Wow. I didn't know there was a land of grief or that you could ride in and out on a horse, the horse being the hide of a drum. And the thing is, you beat that hide as hard as you want to get your anger out. It's not hurting anybody. Unless you live in a condominium, it's 2 a.m. Except for that, it's not hurting anybody. Not you, no one else. But it's paying attention to the anger, the first level of grief. We all have grief in us today. I say there are only 2 kinds of people in the world today. Those who know they're grieving and those who don't know they're grieving. But we're all grieving. We know what we're losing. All of us, and the young are grieving, for sure. And so we need these practices, and it'll make you stronger. And in one of my meditations, when I did this daily for 15 minutes, ended up in a circle of Native American women grieving. And I said to them, you have more to grieve about than I do. And one of them spoke up and said, if your heart is broken, you only have one heart. Stay. And I learned important lesson from that. First of all, grief is not a competition. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's been hurt the most of all? It's not a competition. But secondly, it's absolutely universal. It's part of being human, isn't it? The mystics call it the via negativa. And we need these practices. Whenever we do a cosmic mass, we have grieving built in. We don't do this thing called confession of sin. Bullshit. Get down on the ground, all sixes, and we, again, invite the third chakra, all the sound to come out of there. That's where we carry our grief and our anger in the third chakra. You got to give it outlet. And it's amazing what happens when people are carrying grief. I'll just tell you one quick story. Several years ago, we were part of a retreat for the Sounds True movement in Colorado there, out of Boulder, but they were doing it up in the mountains at the, in the park there. 1,000 people came, people of all traditions. There were rabbis, there were Buddhists, monks in robes, and all kinds of people. And 1,000 people, so we did a cosmic mass there. And afterwards, the woman came up to me. I say she was in her young 60s. She said, I'm an atheist. I'm such a fierce atheist that when I walk down the street and there's a church, I cross the church to go down the street. I said, well, that's pretty fierce. And she said, but something happened to me tonight. And she pointed and hit her chest like this. When we did that grieving thing, something shifted inside of me. By the time communion came along, I had to have some, she said. I was hungry for it. My whole life was flipped around in this one experience. So what that teaches me is that we're yearning for grief experiences. And our churches and synagogues are failing us. But this is a lot of the work I've been doing. And these are two examples, the drum and this other, get down on all fours and doing it in the context. It has to be a safe context. Now, another way we deal with grief is hire a therapist if you can afford it. But that's all about talking. But it's better than nothing. You get the stories out. But you must remember, we carry grief in our bones, in our molecules, in our atoms. I'll tell you one more story. Can I? At our Institute of Creative Spirituality at Holy Names College years ago, we always have art as meditation. We require it because that's how you get into the deeper feelings and you connect ideas with the rest. Well, in the spring, one student, a 42-year-old man came to me and he said, I've been taking massage as meditation. And he said, I just learned, my body reminded me that when I was 6 years old, my aunt came and sexually abused me every Friday night. My parents left me with my aunt. And he was now 42. So he had forgotten it, or thought he had, for 36 years. Imagine how much energy that took to forget that. Focusing on forgetting it or pretending to forget. But his body remembered. And it came out in this art as meditation class. Again, you can't lie to art. You can't lie to the body. M.C. Richards says that all art is bodily. It's incarnational, therefore. So this is another area there where art can heal us, because once he got it out, I remember when he graduated 2 months later, he skipped across the room. He was 20 years younger than when I had met him in the fall. So he had unburdened himself with that. So that's just one more lesson of art. And now our culture underestimates the power of art and creativity. And that's why it's so central, I think, to the healing process of the earth.
When's the next cosmic mass?
Well, our director, a young man in his 30s, unfortunately he moved from the Bay Area to Asheville, North Carolina. But we had a mass this fall at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago. Of course, we flew him in for that. But I would like to have, and I even was looking at this space, but it's too small, I think. But I was talking to someone here on the staff saying that maybe a couple of churches could sponsor one in the East Bay here. And it would be a wonderful thing. And the young people love it. And, we'd have to raise some money because we'd have to fly him in and so forth. But obviously there's talent here. We used to have the Historic Suisse Ballroom for years. Then I went bankrupt on that, but it was worth it because we got the mass going. And Pope Francis, just a month or two ago, the headline was, we need a whole new form for ritual, for liturgy. Well, I wanted to write him and say, we've got it. We've been practicing it for 25 years in the Bay Area, but other places too, around the country, and Canada too. We've done it in the National Cathedral in Washington, and did the World Parliament of Religions in Toronto 4 years ago, etc. So we're ready to go. I think it's something we should bring back for a whole new generation, but get new leaders, a new generation of leaders and everything. So I'm very open to that if we can make it happen. I think our time is up now. Yes, okay. Last question?
I just wanted to ask a real simple question. Well, sure. I guess it's simple.
Maybe.
As an artist, I've got that. The art and the stuff that's involved with that I got. In someone's life I'm not a very big political person. And I have not been following the wars or whatever at all. Mm-hmm. But that's just for personal reasons of not wanting to have that energy in my life. Anyway, what I'm basically saying is, what can I do? As a person who feels like he's a smaller part of the whole picture, but still a part of the picture, what can I do?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're a poet, right? That's your art expression, most dear to you, yeah. So obviously a lot about poetry is about waking people up, with words and images and phrases. So that's something directly you can do, but also you can think about helping younger people with their poetry. I knew a woman, an art poet, back in Chicago when I was living there. Her name was Lee, L-E-E, a wonderful woman, but she was in the suburbs of Chicago, where wealthier families were, whose parents, usually fathers, were running things in business world in Chicago and all that. But she hung out in the biggest high schoolyard. And because the kids were having troubles, lots of suicide attempts, etc. And she would take them home and have them share their dreams. And she didn't get paid for this. And she said she knew that she prevented a number of suicides. Sharing dreams, but interpreting that as a therapist, but as a poet. And getting them to share them. But in creating a community, a circle in this space for these wounded or wounding high schoolers. So there's a lot of wounded young people today, of course. And exactly, and angry. And you realize the anger is the first level of grief. And of course they're filled with grief about what's happening to the earth and whether to bring children in the world because of what's happening to the earth. What a big decision in this time, etc. So think of the young. Think of how you can serve the young. And you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be an ordained therapist or anything else. It's just about inviting them to talk. The first job of an elder today is to listen. Listen to the pain and the joy. And one of the wonderful things about young people is that they can still play. They can still have fun. But, talk about addiction. A lot of them are addicted to the social media stuff and all that. So, but that's the first question to ask. What does the next generation derive? What can they derive from you? And it's not about your talking and bring out their poetry. Help them to write poems about how they're feeling. And because getting the pain out, getting the anger out, the despair out is step number one. And to do it through art, whether it's poetry or dance or ritual and all this, this is a primary work that needs to be done. And it's clear that the churches, for the most part, are not up to the task at this time. And but I hear you have a church and a space, etc., that could do outreach like that. But I think that's what you want to do. Get them to draw it. Draw what they're feeling. Draw what they think about the war in Gaza or about how the Muslims are being treated at this time by the Jews. I just published in my daily meditations a day or two ago a beautiful statement by hundreds of rabbis that was published in by the Shalom Center. In fact, I just got an email this morning from the head rabbi at the Shalom Center, Arthur Waskow, saying how thrilled he was to see that in our magazine, because it was about these Jewish rabbis and others who gathered to denounce what's going on in Israel in the name of the Israeli state as being contrary to the values of their scriptures, etc. And more and more Jewish voices are coming out to help. And then that's where Jewish youngsters and Muslim youngsters can get together. So how do you build deep ecumenism? How do you get different faith traditions together, especially among the young?
Can I share something with you? I don't think I'm like, one thing I want to say in times where I didn't know what we were talking about. I have an 8-year-old grandson. Some people know this. Since he was 3 years old, he would take and paint for 45 minutes, one painting of the universe.
Wow.
So you're done yet? No, I'm not done yet. And now, of course, at 8, he knows all about galaxies and all. Along with that, and the other thing is he doesn't believe in God. He knows I go to church. He knows who we are. Grandpa because he hears from people about Christianity and, God up high and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing is he loves going into Yosemite particularly and just immersing himself in that place. He even said to his mother, I don't know why she wants me to go to Disneyland. Doesn't she know I love Yosemite the most? So it's that kind of awe and wonder
Yeah.
attachment. That's where spirituality comes from, not from
beautiful.
church.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
that's
don't
beautiful.
think he's alone. I think there's a lot of kids that way.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story to hear, isn't it? Yeah, that's important.
Do we have time? Is everyone okay for one more question? Are you okay?
Oh, one more question. Okay.
Respectful of your time and your energy, but I just wanted to, what I'll share really quickly is how big a difference you've made in this world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay? One quick, I discovered you, I was a student at Catholic University in DC, and the Father Curran crisis of in the late 80s, and
Sure.
I discovered your creation spirituality book and said, oh my God, there are other people can think outside the box. Thank you. And I think it's working.
Mm.
And I struggle. This was my question. It might be too big a question for the end of this talk, but my struggle is with evolution depends on survival of the fittest. How do we fit that in with consciousness, the evolution of consciousness? And why is destruction and death part of evolution? And how do we, but yet...
Well, even scientists are changing that today. They're saying it's survival of the fit. That is, those who can fit into the evolution of things. Those are the species that survive, those who can fit, not the fittest. It's not about going to the gym more than anyone else. It's about learning to fit. And fit into what? Well, that's where imagination comes in. Exactly. To bring forth the artist and the intuitive brain in all of us. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure returning here. Thank you to Michael and the other leaders here.